It's time to find out
What Shane
said with Shane Manila.
What's good, world? Time for another Shane Says. Last week, I had Ty DeClaire on, and we were talking about the value of the 101. We were talking about, how we wanted to play it if we had the 101, what we would do with it, how we valued it, more importantly, how the community was valuing it by looking at some trades from Dynasty Daddy. But everyone knows there's more than just a 101 pick. There's an entire other first round. 11 more picks. Not only that, there's actually a second round, a third round, for some reason, a fourth round. Some leagues have like 5 rounds. And if you're in FFPC leagues, even more than that. It's bananas. It's like 7 rounds, 8 rounds, 9 rounds. I don't remember. I haven't been in an FFPC league for a couple of years, and I quickly forget. As an aside, not really germane to this conversation, I think most rookie drafts should only be 3 rounds. Leave a little meat on the bone. Let those fourth rounders hit the waiver wire. Those typical fourth rounders hit the waiver wire and make those waiver wires fun. So anyway, the point of this the point of this episode, what I wanted to talk about is second round picks. Every year, you'll hear analysts, content creators, whatever we're calling ourselves that week. You'll hear us talking about get all the second round picks that you can, because this is a deep class and I want as many dart throws as possible. Just about every year you will hear that, even in classes that aren't particularly deep for some reason. I think we'll say that. Well, guess what? This year, I'd like to get all the seconds. Yeah. You know why? It's a deep class. It's a very deep class. I've done several mocks, probably 4, 5, 6, 7 or so at this point. And yeah, it is a deep class, probably through the third round, but we'll get to that third round another time. Today, I wanted to talk about second round picks. What I wondered was, one, how many second round picks actually turn into producers? How many of them come out the rookie season and actually put up, say, like a top 36 season for running backs, wide receivers, top, let's say, 12 season for tight ends, top 12 season for quarterbacks in second round. So I figured the best way to do that is just grab some ADP. So I went over to DLF and went back to the 2024 class, the 2023 class, and the 2022 class. Just a 3-year snapshot. This isn't the deepest dive, but I think it's instructive. And I think that going back 3 years is probably good enough, right? We change quickly on how we play Dynasty, how our strategies move in this game that we play. So I think 3-year snapshot is pretty good. So what I wanted to see again is, do these second rounders hit, right? Are they top 36 picks? Or excuse me, top 36 performers? And actually, more importantly than that, or just as important probably, is do the players that are picked with these picks, 201 through 212, standard Superflex leagues, should mention that, Superflex leagues, Superflex ADP. So the 201 through the 212. Do these players produce at a top 36 level? And if they don't, or even if they do these players hold their value? Now, these points could be intertwined, right? If players produce, generally they're going to hold their value. It's not often that a player produces at a top 36 level as a rookie and their value drops. So it's a good chance that they will hold their value. But I thought it'd be even better to see if they don't produce, right? If they're not producing, do they still hold their value? So we're going to go through some data. Like I said, it's about 3 years. I do want you to remember this, right? We often complain about players being a bust that we draft. And we typically only look at that from one output, right? Did that player produce? And if they didn't produce, we'll often say, well, that player's a bust. That player's a bust, or whatever term we're using. Basically, the player didn't hit, so they're a bust. But are they really? Because if that player holds their value and they give you a window to move on from them, then they're not really a bust. They've given you a window to move on from them where you can re-roll them, right? Probably in most cases at the same cost or slightly less than what you paid. And if you can re-roll them, even if they didn't produce, I would say they are not a bust. So before we go any further, I did just want to take a look at KTC. Again, it's not a perfect barometer, but it is a barometer of how the community feels about assets, players, and picks. Before I even go into that, though, I did want to note, I started looking at this stuff about a week and a half ago and then started doing some other things and then came back to it. And what I've noticed is that second round picks, perhaps not surprisingly, have increased in value over the last week and a half or so, they've gone up from 1 to 4 places in KTC rankings. The early second round, mid second round, and late second round picks. Right now, early second round picks, they are the 96th ranked player on KTC or asset, however you want to weigh that. Say that they are ranked 92nd. Just so you know, for whatever it's worth, the 2026 second rounders, those are actually more valuable than the rest of the 25 class. Early 2026 picks right now are ranked 105th. Mid second round 2025 picks are 106th, and then late second round picks are 128th. But even that gap has closed. When I began this last week, the mid second round 2025 picks were ranked at 109. And the 2026 picks were ranked at 105. So either way, the gap's closing. This year's class is starting, or this year's picks are starting to increase in value, which makes sense as we get closer to the draft season. We get more information like the Senior Bowl. So, like I said, I went back the last 3 years. 2024, I took a look at that just to see, some of the players that we're talking about. And again, this is using DLF's ADP. And what I did is I looked at their value on KTC prior to the season, the players that were drafted in the second round. I looked at their KTC value prior to the season, August 30th in every case, or August 31st. So prior to the season, and then I looked at their rankings after the season, in the off season. Generally, I try to look from February through about March-ish for their high spikes. 2024 class, we had 4 risers that increased in value, and then the rest were fallers that fell in value. You look at the class, it makes sense, right? It's Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette, Michael Penix. Those 4 were actually risers. Then Trey Benson, Ricky Purcell, Adonai Mitchell, Blake Corum, Roman Wilson, Jalen Wright, Jalen Polk, and Marshawn Lloyd were fallers. A couple of those players didn't play any games. Well, Roman Wilson played 1 game, and I believe Marshawn Lloyd played 0. So there are a lot of fallers. Then I looked at the 23 class. The 23 class was more risers than fallers. We had Kendre Miller rise, Josh Downs, Rashee Rice, Roshan Johnson, Jaden Reed, Tajay Spears, Sam Laporta, and then Zach Charbonnet had no change whatsoever. He was RB20 prior to the season, and then RB20 during the offseason at one point or another. So that's 8. And only 4 players fell. And you could see why when I give you the names. It was Michael Mayer, who had a terrible rookie season. Jonathan Mingo, absolutely trash-tastic. Marvin Mims, who had a fun little stretch in 2024, but in 2023, not so much. And then Hendon Hooker, who didn't play, right? Then I looked at the 22 class. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It was split 6 and 6. In this class we had, and it might be a while ago, you don't remember, we had Jahan Dotson, Rashad White, Des Ritter, John Mechie, Damian Pierce, Alec Pierce, a couple of the Pierces were risers, for whatever that's worth. So apparently if you were kin to Pierce, you were a riser that year. And then we had David Bell. Anybody remember David Bell? He was a faller. Malik Willis didn't play, faller. Isaiah Spiller, meh. This is a fun one. Trey McBride dipped down to tight end 20. He was tight end 12 prior to the season, and then he was the tight end 20 in the offseason. Oops. Yeah, looking back now, I bet you we all wish we would have gotten some Trey McBride. Then there was Amir White and Jalen Tolbert. So 3 years, 36 picks. What I wanted to do is first look at production. So of those 36 players, there were 19 that played at least eight games. I did that because I don't think it's fair, but it's not fair to look at players that didn't play. Of course, they're not going to hold value. Roman Wilson played 1 game. Marshawn Lloyd played 0 games, I believe. Hendon Hooker didn't play football. A couple of these players didn't play 8 games. Some of them played none games. Malik Willis didn't start at all. John Mechie didn't play, right? So I didn't feel it was fair to look at them as from a production standpoint. So what I did is the 36 players, like I said, 19 played at least 8 games. So in the 2024 class, we had 1 top 36 player, and that was Ladd McConkey. I got him as wide receiver 14 on player profile. We had 3 top 25 wide receivers from the 23 class, or excuse me, we had 2 top 25 wide receivers from the 23 class, and Rashee Rice and Jaden Reed. Then we got Sam Laporta, baby, tight end 3. And I got to be honest with you, when I was going through this exercise, I was hoping that there would be a high tight end because I did not want to call a tight end 14 a winner because in my eyes, that wouldn't be a winner, but we didn't run in that. So it's not a problem. Sam Laporta in 2023, tight end 3 points per game. And then in 2022, one top 36 player, Dameon Pierce. He was the RB20 that year, again, using player profiler, points per game. So out of that, right, just looking at those numbers, that's 19 players that played. And we had, let's just count it up. 1, 3, 4. 4 out of 19. 4 out of the 19 players, or maybe my math is not math. Let's just make sure. I've got one top 36. Yep. 35. Yep. That's 4. 5. Yep. So 5 out of 19 players gave you at least a top 36 season. So 26%. So not a lot, right? Not a lot. And math might be a little off 1 or 2, but either way, it's under 30%. So that was interesting, right? So you would think with players not producing, maybe their value would dip. It's not what I found. What I found is that 18 players increased in KTC value from the second round, and 18 fell 50-50. And again, that's despite almost 70% of the players not producing at a good level. We'll call it top 36 good level for a rookie, So I hit whatever you want to call it. I think that's actually pretty good, right? I don't know how many players in general, and this be a larger data set than my little brain could probably could handle. And if someone wants to handle a spreadsheet, I don't know how many players in general that don't produce hold their value. But I would say the fact that like 70% of these players didn't produce at a top 36 level, but 50% held their value is pretty good. Pretty good. So, just one thing about the commonality between the fallers too, right? Is they have had absolutely dreadful seasons, just absolutely dreadful seasons, right? And I don't mean just bad, right? Like Keon Coleman and Xavier Legette, I think they had 7.8. I know they did. I don't know why I'm thinking, but they had 7.8 points per game last year. That's not very good, right? But their value didn't fall. Meanwhile, a player like Adonai Mitchell, well, he scored 3.2 fantasy points per game, or Jonathan Mingo, who had 5.7 points per game, right? Those dudes fell. So you pretty much have to be a very bad producer, not just a mediocre producer, like just absolutely trash-tastic, just terrible rookie season to drop in value. Now, in a couple cases, we had John Mechie, Kendre Miller, Roshan Johnson, Zach Charbonnet, despite not really playing much or modest rookie seasons like, Johnson and Charbonnet, Mechie didn't play at all. They saw an increase in their value. And even Hendon Hooker, who didn't play at all, he saw an increase in value. I thought this was interesting, right? Like I said, Kendre Miller, John Mechie, Roshan Johnson, Zach Charbonnet, and Hendon Hooker. Those are players that didn't play much or didn't play at all, but somehow their value still went up. And I think that speaks to the likability, right? And we've been talking a lot about this last few months. You want to find players that the community likes, because then even when they don't hit, even if they don't produce for you, there's a chance that someone in your league is going to continue to like them. So what should we be doing with these picks, right? Should we be moving these picks for established players or just making the picks? Now, the biggest predictor of future fantasy success is past fantasy success, right? So does it make sense to just trade these picks for the known quantities? Now, the problem with that is the known quantities that you're usually buying aren't going to be, I don't know, high-end assets, right? They're going to be your Mike Evans, who could age out. They are your James Conner, who could age out. But I did want to go ahead and just take a look at some of the players that are in that range, that second round pick range on KTC right now. And there's players like Dalton Kincaid, Tucker Kraft, Cortland Sutton. I think I'd buy Cortland Sutton, Michael Pittman, Mark Andrews, David Njoku, Kyle Pitts, Isaiah Likely, Travis Etienne, if you say his name correctly, and James Conner. So I'm not going to tell you what to do there. Personally, I think I do like buying established players with some of these picks. Obviously, the later the second round pick, the more that I would like to move it for an established player. Obviously, in cases where I think I'm competing next year. But even better than that, what I'd really like to do is move those second round picks for 2026 seconds. The reason for it, it's just simple. It's fungibility. It's flexibility. It gives me the opportunity, even especially in competing teams, right? Rosters that I believe are competing, not so much teams that are in a rebuild. I'm fine with making a bunch of picks, but in teams where it looks like I'm going to be competing, I'd rather move that pick for a 2026 second, because in season I'll be looking for help. In season, I'll know who's producing. I won't have to guess. Even right now, if I move a pick for Mike Evans, I can't guarantee you that he's going to produce next year. But come October, November next year, I'll know if Mike Evans is producing and if I should move a second for him or whoever the case may be at that point. Mike Evans apparently is my poster boy today, but you get my point. It's fungibility. So that's what I prefer to do with the seconds. But again, I just want to just a small snapshot, get the heads moving, get your gears moving, thinking about second rounders. 50% of the time, they hold their value from before the season to after the season. And again, that's despite the fact that 70%, roughly 70% of those players in that second round don't produce at a top 36 level. So there's that. I don't know if I'll dive into the third round. I don't know if anybody would find that interesting. Most assuredly, I will not be getting into the fourth round. And again, if you have 4-round drafts, get rid of those and cut one of those rounds off. So, hey, I appreciate you watching. Everybody take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.